And we're live. Hello.
Hello.
I know, a lot. Hi, everyone. My name is Julia Hawley. I am host of CityClips Live, and we love to talk about North Florida business and tech. And we are also a business newsletter. So really excited to have Lauren Helm here. Thank you so much for joining us on our episode for this week. And I believe we're at episode 83 or 84, somewhere for City Clips. We have had amazing guests. And before we dive into Lauren's story, let me quickly introduce her. She is a seasoned public relations and communications leader with over 15 years of experience helping organizations create compelling and impactful stories from healthcare and nonprofits to associations and government. As an accredited PR professional and certified PR counselor, a distinction held by fewer than 100 individuals across the country, she combines creativity with strategic precision to high-stakes communication. So thank you so much for hopping on today.
Yes, thank you for that lovely introduction. I appreciate it.
I got to give credit to my team. They helped me get that. I found it somewhere. I'm sure you wrote it.
Maybe.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about all things related to your expertise in PR, but also, most importantly, I love your story of starting a business and being a mom too. There's not too many of us mompreneurs in town. So I had a great conversation with you when we had our one-on-one, and really happy to have you on today.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. As you know, also being a mom yourself, it's not for the faint of heart to be a mom and trying to run a business too and running your household at the same time. So it's definitely been a labor of love, but it's been something that's been a very positive change, not only for myself, but also my family.
So I know you spent a good amount of time in corporate. What made you decide to jump and cross over to entrepreneurship and starting a business?
So funny enough, it's actually the kids and the family life and just kind of having that balance. I worked quite a bit in healthcare, and during certain parts of the year, it was nothing to put in, a 70 to 80-hour week. And when you have small children, that's just not feasible. You can't sustain that, right? And so whenever it was just my husband and I, not a problem. He's got the dog, he can take care of everything. But then when it comes to the kids, I realized I was missing out, and I didn't want to miss out. The whole point of us having children, and we actually had a really difficult time to our journey to being parents, was though that we could be present and that we could witness a lot of those first, and being able to be present when we want to be present and can be present. And so that's kind of that initial, I guess, spark of an idea of like, well, maybe this is something that I could do on my own, so that way I have some of that flexibility. So if I do have a sick child, being home for the day is not that big of a deal. Or if it's, hey, I do want to take a couple of hours to go to a school play, or, you know what, I do want to go and have lunch at the elementary school with my daughter. And I like having that flexibility. And honestly, our family is thriving now that we've got that. And so, yeah, I think that there really are the spark of, there's other things too, but I would say that they're probably the big driving factor behind the decision of going out. And so far, knock on wood, it's been great.
Yeah, no, I have a very similar reason why I started to. I dabbled with going back into work full time with the kids under the age of 4. And I realized that was a little bit too early. I was like, no, this is not going to work.
Yeah.
But yeah, having done this now for a little bit over 10 years, it's been nice to have the freedom, to have that flexibility, like be there for them when they're sick, or those appointments, those doctor's appointments.
Yes.
Never ending, right? And all the things that come with it. So, and to be able to attend a play or whatever the kids are doing at school, right? And so I'm so glad that you've had that experience too. So how many years has it been now? It's been, I believe, so 5 years?
So in October, I actually celebrate 2 years of being out on my own. And I'm still young in terms of the entrepreneurial world. However, I'm no stranger to business. So my degree is actually in business administration, and the goal in going to college and getting that degree was to eventually have my own business. And so here I am, and I'm thriving. I'm doing really well. I'm actually on track to make a pretty record year for year 2. So I'm very excited about that. And, having clients that trust me and my leadership, and my vision for their brand really says a lot. I actually got a compliment the other day from one of my clients I was like, you're just singing my praises. Like, you make me feel so good, and just validating why I'm doing what I'm doing. And it's just because, in this case, she's like, I don't know enough about communications and marketing, but you understand, and you put it in a way, you take a lot of this complicated jargon, a lot of legal documents, if you will, and translate it to where someone can understand that. But then not only do they understand it, but you tell a story around why it's important and how that's impactful. She's like, and it's just something I could never do. And so we were working on an advocacy project together, and she's like, these are really great, tying these stories in and understanding how this is going to help effectuate change, for what their mission and purpose is. And it was nice to hear that, and to hear that, I am helpful. While I may not be necessarily integrated in the day in, day out team, I'm still very much a partner in that, and being able to put that forward to fruition is great.
That's also another plus to being able to be the representative, right? Because you get to see the outcome and how happy the client can be. Because sometimes, I guess, with corporate or just being part of the team, you don't always see how clients respond to your work.
Right.
So it's nice being able to be in that position.
Yeah. And it's kind of seeing it full circle. It's like dominoes, if you will. If one starts to lean over and hits the others, you kind of see it all the way through to the end, and get to see what ended up being out of all of that. And so it's really nice to see it kind of on that other side, because to your point, on corporate teams, a lot of times you're siloed, and you're working towards this one initiative where you realize it benefits the bigger picture, right? But you don't always get to see all the different moving parts. And so that's something that I definitely enjoy now, being on this side, on the consulting side.
I'm glad that I asked you how many years, because I really got the impression you've been around like 5+ years, because you do such a good job with how you've represented yourself. And I can't believe it's only been 2 years, but you've done a lot. You've accomplished a lot in a couple of years, and you're speaking at conferences and events, right? Did you imagine yourself already doing that at this level? Starting at early stage?
No, to be honest with you, no. It's just, one of the things that I think that I do really well is networking and being able to build that relationship. And I think really where I am today is because of those relationships that I've built. So when I initially went out on my own, didn't really have a business plan, didn't really know what exactly I was going to do. Just, I'm going to do it, and I'm going to do it well, right? And the type A in me is like, well, okay, let's set some goals. Let's figure out how we're going to do this. And then, about month 4 into this, like, oh no, what was I thinking? What have I done to myself? But staying true to that process and taking that journey and riding that coaster, whether it's the ups and downs. And it really, it's a great ride. If you're willing to take that and you have the ability to take that, I would encourage somebody to do it, because you never know. And you don't want to wake up the next day and be like, well, what if I had done this? And like I said, I went to school for business. I wanted to have my own business one day, and I didn't want to live life full of regret of saying, well, what happens if I hadn't have done this? What if I had just stayed on the path that I was on and I didn't try this? So whether, it turns into a long-time career, or if this is maybe just a season for me, I'm very thankful that I've had this experience now. And I think it grows into, to your point, building that confidence factor, right? And going out and being able to talk and being able to share more.
I love that. And being so articulate and being able to tell someone's story and a brand story. What have you found to be a common mistake that people are doing? Maybe even overspending on trying to do something that they shouldn't. What are the common challenges that you've noticed that people could avoid?
It really kind of curtails back to brand voice, I would say. So in many instances for clients that work with me, they've got pieces and parts of what I would consider the entire brand package. And if you know anything about branding, then you know it's more than just a logo and some colors, right? But really trying to find that voice and making sure that that voice is, consistent throughout all communications, whether it's printed materials, website, digital, if they're on camera, whatever it may be, but just making sure that that voice is carried through and that it's consistent. And I think that that's where people really kind of have a hang up. It's like, well, why do I have to say the same thing here and here and here? And you do, because you want that message, right? A good example is you can put an ad in a newspaper and it's either hit or miss for that one day for that printed paper, right? But if you have that ad and now you also have, maybe a story that got featured in a regional magazine, or maybe you had, a short form video that you posted on social media, all of that starts kind of translating back into that storytelling, right? And that brand voice. And I think that that's where the disconnect is not realizing that it's throughout the entire ecosystem of that communication and marketing funnel, whether it's external or internal.
I love that. It's really true. You send out so many different messages, it just gets confusing.
Yeah.
And really, I don't know why it's so challenging for folks to just stick to one main message and just hone in on it, for a period of time.
Right. And I think some of that stems back, just people also don't look at analytics and kind of see how that's trending, and to give something time to take hold. It's not just a spray and leave it kind of, process. It's no, you have to be consistent. And without that consistency, like to your point, you're just going to create confusion. People are like, oh, I really don't know what you're about. I'll go over here to your competitor, right? And that's what they're doing better than you. So how can you do that better and show up? And a lot of it is consistency, and you've got to give it some time. People by nature aren't going to respond just like that. I mean, yeah, we like instant gratification. I mean, Amazon used to have the 2-day shipping. They don't anymore for most things, right? But to be able to instantly get something, yes, that's true. But then there's also a whole other segment of your audience that sometimes it takes a while for them to adapt to that message. And depending upon what it is that you're saying and what your call to action is, it could take some time. And so giving it time and being patient, I think, is, some of the downfall a little bit too.
Let's get into your Tallahassee native roots, because you're from Tallahassee originally. You grew up here, and I mean, what's it been like seeing all the growth?
So it's so funny, because my husband, he grew up in Tallahassee as well. We actually grew up 10 minutes apart from one another. We didn't meet anybody, or didn't meet each other until much later in life. He went to a different high school than I, because of how the county, or the school district line divided us. And so I had no clue he even existed. But we were talking the other day, we live out closer to Childs High School on the northeast side of Tallahassee. And he was telling me about how he used to have to come out here for different basketball games or baseball games whenever he was in high school. And he's like, there was nothing but the high school. And you were like, why would they build this high school in the middle of the country, right? And now you're seeing all of this development and, new homes and new schools being built, and, just kind of seeing Tallahassee, our footprint grow. It's just been really interesting to see it, even like in the past 5, 6 years. I think that it's grown exponentially, and the ideas and trying to be that ecosystem for local business, and especially in the tech side too. I think that it's really important that we maintain that, and we hold on to that while still keeping true to what is Tallahassee, more of that laid back, I love having oak trees out in the yard. I love, being able to go out to Publix and seeing friendly faces, but still having that growth too. It's been really interesting to watch over the years.
Yeah, I love that too. I do, because I lived in the city, San Francisco, for so long, and also spent some time in Southern California. And I do really like how Tallahassee is, where you've got that small town feel. Well, it's more like a big town really now, small city feel. Right. But and then you bump into people and say hello, and you see the familiar faces of Publix. I'm used to anonymity. Like, I don't see the same people ever again.
Right.
But there's something to it with Tallahassee. And so, when I moved here, it was all dirt, like on Game Street. There was no college town. Right. So it's pretty fascinating to see how fast things are growing already, and it's going to continue to grow, but hopefully responsibly. So from your perspective, and with your communications and PR background, how can Tallahassee tell its story where it's more clear? Like, what can Tallahassee be as a brand?
So it's, Tallahassee just celebrated its bicentennial, so it celebrated 200 years. And I know that there were quite a bit of different things that Visit Tallahassee put on to help celebrate that and try to tell the history of how Tallahassee came to be. And I think, when you talk about brand, I think we have to capture that in the terms of we're just, we're a very cultural ecosystem, right? We've got 2 major universities that produce top tier talent. We now have our community college that has turned into a state college, right? And offering 4-year degrees. That's amazing. We have a technical school too in our backyard. We also have all of these entrepreneurial folks that are coming, that are being drawn to Tallahassee. And I think that that's something that when we talk about brand and we talk about brand story, going back to that consistency factor of holding on to that consistency and telling those stories and showcasing, hey, Tallahassee is awesome. A prime example is the Mag Lab that we have. It's nationally recognized. Why aren't we doing more to be able to push that and to share that story of how it even came to be and why it's important, and all of these cool things that they're doing at the Mag Lab for other large, big, huge brands. I think about like healthcare and stuff like that they're working on magnetic stuff for some of their devices. And it's mind blowing. It's like, it's right here in my backyard. And, I didn't know that until probably a year and a half ago.
Right. Yeah, I know. It's like, if you're not in the business community, you won't really know. But once you start tapping into the circles of, the business communities, and there's so many different ones too,
right. Yes.
memberships and stuff, and you start like hearing about these things that actually exist in town that, oh my goodness, I've been here for 20 plus years. I've heard that over and over again. Like, I didn't know we have a Mag Lab here.
Right.
Right. The most powerful. So yeah, no, that's, I love how you, captured that so quickly. And with your background in healthcare, and you might have seen, I think you've seen Eddie, mutual friends. Like some of his vision, like how he had, he is a big picture person, and he talked about it would be really great if we can somehow, include healthcare as part of the conversation with the ecosystem developing and maturing.
Right. And I think that that's true. I mean, if you look at, Tallahassee Memorial Hospital and Capital Regional, or I guess it's HCA Florida now, they've rebranded.
Right. Yeah.
And you look, you've got Florida Blue, you also have Capital Health Plan, 2 major insurers right here in our backyard. And I think if you look at kind of what they've already established and what they've already done in terms of rural medicine, because we do have rural, communities right outside the city center, I think that they've taken great strides and they're doing a great job. It's just now that the demand is so much more than what they're able to give. So they're doing things like scholarships at the colleges to be able to funnel talent through, their talent resource channels. They're working with some of the technical colleges to, produce medical assistants, LPNs, all of these kind of I guess first tier, medical credentials, to then maybe that would inspire them and they can get free tuition to go on to go be an RN or to be an APRN or whatever it may be. But I think that they're here locally. I know that they're working towards that, and they're certainly doing a good job, and we're seeing that needle kind of turn a little bit. But it's just, again, that demand is so much higher than what we're able to keep up with currently. So how do we work within those confines to still deliver top tier care and be known, like TMH is known for a regional cancer center. That's phenomenal for here in Tallahassee.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. There's so much. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of innovation needs. AI, I was at that event. Seriously. I mean, that's one of the things I wanted to ask you too, because AI is already disrupting so many things, disrupting the tech world, disrupting communications. And
yes, absolutely.
I'm sure helping people in communications at the same time too. So it's like, how do we take these tools to advance our community, but in an ethical way, right?
Right. So, and I mean, and that's a big topic just in general, is the ethics behind the usage of AI, and not to tell any kind of proprietary information, but I had the opportunity to shadow a major hospital system that was utilizing AI, and it was, AI that they have built internally, but it was to help with patient care and to understand what intervals was that patient going through in terms of when a nurse come to check their vitals, when they saw a doctor last, what specialist that they saw, all the way down to, any kind of bodily fluid, whether it's, doing a fluid for IVs, or if it's using the restroom or anything like that. I mean, tracking like meticulous data that if we had to do that manually, We probably wouldn't be able to track all those different points, right? So utilizing this AI technology, they're now able to deliver better and more efficient patient care. And they can see where things are at. So even internally, they're able to adjust, say, okay, well, maybe you didn't see a doctor. Maybe there's a lag time of, let's just say 4 hours. Well, we want to close that gap and make it maybe 3.5. So how do we do that? And they start kind of moving all these different components around to be able to do that. And that's all through the use of AI, something that we didn't have just a few years ago. And it was really interesting to kind of see that and understand the vision behind it and the innovation of why it's being implemented. And hopefully eventually, they perfect it, right? And they're able to put that out through other hospital systems too, and physician offices where appropriate. But I do think that they're onto something in terms of trying to utilize that to not necessarily replace patient care, but to enhance patient care. And I think that's the difference when you talk about AI. AI shouldn't replace communications. It shouldn't replace any kind of tech stack that you may have. It should enhance it, because you still have to have that human element. If you put a prompt into any kind of AI engine and it spits it back to you, chances are there's something in there that's not quite right, or doesn't quite sound like you. And so it's putting back that human element into that. But I certainly think that there are tools to be able to enhance, how whatever that delivery mechanism may be for you at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's great. At least it can make things more efficient. A lot of the repetitive tasks, they could handle those kinds of things, and it helps teams speed up their process. So that's awesome because, with healthcare, obviously there's so much paperwork. Like the medical staff's drowning in paperwork that's required and all that. So if there's ways that can help solve those kinds of challenges and problems in the operations, of how things, like taking care of a patient, and nurses are not worried about paperwork, they're focused on the patient.
Correct. Right. And I mean, those tools have already existed in a way. They're just not, I guess, to the forefront of how society views them now. Siri, for example, has been out for quite some time, right? That's an AI, mechanism to be able to search and do, but we've already had these in place. And so I think a lot of it is just the fear. And again, I think it centers around those ethics, right? And being able to discern, is this a legitimate, source of information, or is this, produced by AI and it's just spreading misinformation out there? And I think that that's something, again, in time, it will perfect and be able to move forward, and we continue on with innovation. But it's not a foreign thing. We've already had it for quite some time. It's just being utilized a little bit differently now.
Right. Yeah. It's been around. I mean, Amazon, they have it was Alexa. Yeah.
Yep.
Google. Like, it's already been in our devices. It's just now like, oh, AI, Yeah. And we're seeing now businesses, like laying off people. It is impacting jobs in some ways.
It is.
So yeah, no, it's really fascinating to still see, like, it's this new wave of tech, right? That's what I'm hearing from experts. There was the .com era, and then apps was a whole new thing, and now it's AI. This is the next wave that we have to adjust to. So
and I don't think it's necessarily replacing all jobs by any means. I do think that there's maybe a usage for it for some, maybe entry level, but at the same time, you still have to have that human element. And I think of hospitality industry, like hotels, for example. AI is not going to come in and clean your room, right, and make your bed. You still need something. I mean, maybe a robot, I don't know, but you still have to have that human element to come in there and check, or hey, my toilet broke, or it's not flushing, or whatever. Who's going to come and fix that? So I think that, again, some of it is just the fear that's been out there and how media has kind of twisted some things. Mm-hmm. But I certainly think that it's there to enhance and to make sure that we're working more efficiently.
Yeah, there's definitely, AI cannot replace soft skills and personable skills. And I would want a real person at my hospital bed if I'm in pain. Right. I don't want a robot. I don't want to be talking to a computer. Right,
exactly. You want to talk to a human being that can hold your hand and can understand, where your concerns are, and being able to answer whatever questions that you have.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big deal. Think about, going back to being a mom, thinking about it when you were in triage, when you were getting ready to have your kids. I want a doctor, right? I don't want to talk to something that's AI. I want a doctor to explain to me what exactly is happening here.
Yeah. I don't know if it happened to you, but there was a whole staff when I was in stat mode when, baby's about to come out.
Right. Yes.
Like,
Yep.
oh, boy,
Yeah. It was a complete rush into the room. And I'm like, what's going on? I don't know what's going on. I'm
Yeah.
so out of it.
Exactly. They didn't warn us about this part.
Right.
But yeah, no, and just with a few minutes to wrap up and everything, I wanted to ask you too, because you also work with nonprofits.
Yeah.
What have you found to be the most common problem, in terms of helping nonprofits and helping them also gain some success,
Right. So I think a lot of it comes back to resources. They just don't have the resources they need. They've got, there's so many deserving nonprofits out there. And I really kind of focus a little bit more in the education space and specifically early childhood education. And it's just something that I have a passion about as a mom myself. I understand the value of that education. And they just don't have the resources. So trying to find things like, tools like Canva, for example. Canva can not only help them with some of their graphics, but it can also help them with their social media scheduling. So trying to show them these different tools that are out there that are more cost effective for a nonprofit that may not have a bunch of resources, and being able, again, to tell that story and perfect that story. And there's a few questions that I typically will go through with a nonprofit of like, try to explain their story back to me. And I'm like, if we're stumbling at any of these points, and there's only 5 questions, but if we're stumbling at any of these points, that's where the problem lies, and we've got to fix this, right? And so whenever you sell that story, you should be able to say it very quickly. Within about 5 minutes, somebody should completely understand and be on board with your mission.
Awesome. And before I jump ahead again, I want to make sure people see your website and people can easily find you. Let me make sure. Okay. Really cool. Love that whole navigation type of theme.
Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead.
With a last name like Helm, I mean, it blended perfectly. So I was like, oh,
right.
Let's do it.
So appropriate. I didn't even connect that yet. Oh my gosh. So people can, you have social media? Let me make sure that people are aware. I see you active on LinkedIn for sure. I'm more on LinkedIn now.
I'm probably more active on LinkedIn than I am on any of the other social channels, truthfully. But yeah, any of them I'm responsive, and I put out some good tips for various businesses at different stages too. So yeah, definitely take a look at that.
That's awesome. Well, is there anything you'd like to conclude with for anyone who's considering, maybe someone who's also in a similar boat as us when we first started? You can say whatever you want. I'm going to give the floor to you to just say your.
Yeah, the only thing that I would say, for somebody that's in a similar boat as me, or, it's looking to start a business, is find your village. You can't do it alone, and you shouldn't do it alone. You may have support at home, and that's great, but you need to find somebody that's been through it, that understands at different stages. For example, for me, obviously having young children, it's helpful to know somebody that also has young children that's going through it. And I really love women-owned businesses because, I'm a woman, and so it's nice to hear their success stories. But I also find that those peer networking groups really bring those visions to life. When you're stuck and you're not quite sure, there's somebody else that's been through that can give you some advice to help push you through that slump, and you come out so much better on the other side. And, there's no such thing as I in team. So having that team behind you is really helpful. And, I find too, I don't know if it's unique to Tallahassee or other areas, experiences too, but I find that a lot of times when you're talking to other entrepreneurs, they talk to you with open arms. They're very open and honest about their journey and kind of what it happened for them, and kind of where it clicked and where it made more sense and where they're at. And it's a breath of fresh air to know that you don't have to have it all figured out all at one time, right? And it takes time, and there's highs and there's lows and there's everything in between. But again, if you have that team, you can push through whatever challenge you're facing.
I love that. That was so awesome. Thank you so much. That was so good. And it's really true. Like this ecosystem, it's been an entrepreneurial ecosystem for a long time now, but it's really starting to come to light, and it's possible to start a side hustle, start a job, start a business while you're full-time. And then eventually, maybe at some point, you start building fully, all in.
Right.
So,
absolutely.
Yeah, just go for it.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much. And for those of you who catch this episode, would love to hear from you. For those of you who aren't aware, you can subscribe for free, cityclips.net, because we're going to do a recap of this episode, of course, and reshare it to all our subscribers. Thank you so much, Lauren, for being on the show today.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it so much.
Awesome. I will see you on the other side.